distilling concentrated fear that's diamond pure, crystal clear, oppressor strong and woven into every single article you read and song they let you hear. And then Elon heard that Jeff enhanced our fears by 86%, and he said, hold my beer. And not a single sheep among the herd would turn their head or say a word, cause they were all too busy begging for the shears, begging for the muzzle, happy just to guzzle, feed, and watch a screen for all their years. Man, to each his own, can't afford a home, but they'll let you have your cozy little ecosphere. Where there among your own devices you can break the seventh seal, overthrow the oracles and slay the seer. All the tomes were burned and all the lips were seared. Shut your eyes and all our lives just disappear. Now blink 'em twice. Welcome to your ecosphere.
They'll gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. They'll gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. It's 'cause you are. They'll gladly stagnate a living wage, snap the chains, bury it. Labor slaves in rusty cages dragged behind a chariot, led by Mr. Racial Jungle, Joseph R. Iscariot, fighting over scraps as they barrage us all with variants and BuzzFeed clickbait, straight until we're paralyzed, trying to distract us from the concentration camps that Joe had swore he'd close but only chose to amplify, where they got 50-something kids in cages made for 5 to occupy. And no, she hasn't seen the camps, but Harris swears they're paradise. She tells us the facilities are safe, and that right down to the women, they are regularly sterilized. Then she throws her head back and she proceeds to laugh, that sort of heartless cackle you'd expect from someone working steadfastly on behalf of the virus and a Congress full of parasites. And where was I? I was busy cashing every blue check, demonstrating plainly all the narratives expected from the verified. I was busy breeding verbal leeches by the terabyte. Train them to exsanguinate the wealthy while they sleep at night. Bleed the oil barons dry and barren, say they showed us how to share and now we share alike. Tell them I contracted rabies from a feral mic. Now I'm just another species losing sleep to noise pollution and these glaring lights, forced to change its habits and adapt to just survive. But now it's safe to say that some of us are thriving in the moment, throwing shit on presidential homes beneath the Paris skies. So if you feel like you're just powerless, I guess you bought the lie. But I can tell they're petrified of our collective might, 'cause I can hear those gentrifiers weeping at the sight of our collective rights. And I only can imagine the intensifying fear of knowing revolution's near, and all that's left to do is simply wallow in the thick anticipation of a rabid bite. And baby, one day you can ask your leaders just what that was like before you grab a slice. So if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. Honey, if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. See, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, and tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark because you aren't, because we aren't. You see, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and make you build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, where they'll tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark because you aren't, because we aren't.
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride. I thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
My favorite songs don't hit the same way. I get to the end of a 4-minute track and I'm only looking back thinking, what did they actually say? So I try to sit down with my wife and watch TV, but I just see propaganda elevating the police in the simplest of sitcom banter, and tiny little altars full of offerings to corporate masters in every well-planned wide pan shot of the name brand stocking up the pantry. Pull back one long tracking shot out to the garage to the logo on the Camry. Nice tight shot of the Camry, close-up view of the Camry, slow pan up on the Camry, long slow zoom to the unmoving human who's up in the front with the tube pumping fumes to him straight from the back of the Camry. Ashamed he just could not provide for himself, let alone for his family. It's a blue pill mindset that spent 2020 making dance beats.
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride, and thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
Ignorance is bliss, which explains why a lot of us are so fucking happy. Quick to take the trip for all its trappings. Never one to ask what's up, what's going on, or God forbid what's happening. A lot of us would strap into the ride and then spit right in the eye of the guy whose job it is to snap your fastenings. But maybe we're all born with that capacity. Maybe each of us comes standard with humor, compassion, malice, and audacity. Some of us are blind to the system, but some see it fine and say this is how it has to be. Some of us can stare wide-eyed at a nationwide human catastrophe and only offer platitudes and recipes. And I wish that I could tell myself that nothing's worth obsessing past my everyday necessities. I wish that I could cry fake news over anything that threatened me, tune out our abuses and consume a little levity. Wish that I could offer up my son a smoother destiny. Wish I had some better lessons for how best to answer questions for the things I've been perpetually questioning. But I'm too busy looking at our leaders, wondering what I might be missing from their messaging. Trying to find the reasoning to let 250,000 people meet an early reckoning. And even though I know the truth, it's hard to swallow something that's so little.
Legend says that Hercules swept Cerberus right off his feet and effortlessly set him down softly as a songbird. Atlas kept the world upon his back and every day wondered whether he could stand it any longer. And Tara Reid came out to say the man they tried to label the messiah of morality was really just another rapist. And I don't intend to hesitate when asked who was the stronger. Tara, like Assange, knew that carrying the truth would be the hardest labor. Tara knew that her assailant wasn't gonna make us any safer, and knew he's just the type of man to hand a decent foreign leader US printed walking papers, and knew he'd be relentless and aggressive in the war he'd wage upon her very character, that his attempts to weaken and degrade and embarrass her would be her only compensation. But I strongly doubt that anyone could ever have foreseen the stream of hate that came from quote-unquote progressives and the self-styled titans of survivor advocation. So if you really think there's something to be gained out of sharing your pain with the world, you are sorely mistaken. The Biden team just dragged their feet addressing Tara's allegations. Until they had a decent list of smears, then they aired them out on every station. And it turns out no one wants to hear the truth of who they praised as being worthy of such bloated liberal celebration. That no one wants to really know the person they've so valiantly defended, even when it meant they had to gloat and shit all over someone braver than they'd be if given the occasion. Now cue the faceless comment squad invasion. Cue those fuckers crawling out the woodwork to come analyze the way you wore your hair and what you wear. Like your appearance waives your rights, or that somehow you're the reason for your situation. Somehow they've decided you should bear responsibility for what such monstrous men insist on doing. Somehow they're deluded by the empty, hypocritical, and useless fucking platitudes that bastard keeps on spewing. And I think it's very telling that the best of their excuses when they try to come and justify our president's abuses is a hearty butt Trump. In which case I'll remind you that you never saw the news attempt to sell us Donald Trump like he was morally upstanding or a decent human. But when Joe says something bigoted or ogles someone's little kid, CNN says, isn't this refreshing? Biden's like a mix of JFK and FDR with all the finer parts of Harry Truman. Christ, I know that they don't think that we're the brightest, but at least pretend we got a couple lumens. Ask yourself if you have ever questioned what they fed you, or do you just shut your eyes and then consume it? And now ask yourself if you ate every one of Biden's lies under guise of harm reduction and the promise of a slight improvement. And now imagine long ago that Biden chose to show you who he really was by traumatizing you for his amusement. Now imagine that you watched him touch a Bible with those filthy hands, and then assume the power of the highest seat in all the land, of knowing your attacker wields a global coalition born of 3-letter agencies who'll make a life's mission out of trying to discredit you through lies, damn lies, and collusion. Big tech is never gonna separate from our surveillance state. Fuck's sakes, they're just a breath away from total fusion. So there will come a time where even if you see the light, your voice will never reach the sky through all the bots and all the noise pollution. So trust us when we tell you that the masking of abuses is perhaps this country's oldest institution. And I know nothing nobler than facing it in honor of the truth.
Welcome, everyone. This is The Politics of Survival, and I'm your host, Tara Reid. Thank you for joining us tonight. As many of you saw on social media, I was talking about how excited I was, and I am thrilled to meet someone I admire greatly and who has done a lot in the movement. And I want to go ahead and read his bio because it's just such an amazing bio. So excuse me if I look down, but I'm going to have to read it. So I'm going to introduce Omali Yeshitela, the chairman of the African Socialist International and the African People's Socialist Party, and also the founder of the Uhuru Movement. From the day he tore down the racist mural in City Hall in St. Petersburg, Florida in 1966, Chairman Omali has never stopped fighting for the liberation of African people everywhere. In the heat of the revolutionary struggle during his years in prison for his political work, Chairman Omali developed the theory of African internationalism that understands the world through the eyes of the African working class. In 1968, Chairman founded The Burning Spear, a newspaper which is still published today, with numerous articles, pamphlets, and books. He has led countless campaigns in the name of the African working class, including Community Control of Housing Initiative that won 22,000 votes in Oakland, California in 1984, 1984, and the campaign that freed Desi Woods, an African woman imprisoned for killing a white attempted rapist with his own gun. In 1996, the chairman mobilized a community to fight back following the rebellion sparked by the police murder of 17-year-old Tyron Lewis in St. Petersburg, Florida. Chairman made reparations a household word. And this is really important. Reparations became a household word because of his work, and with the International Tribunal and Reparations for African People, which was held in Brooklyn, New York in 1982, finding that African people are owed $4.1 trillion for stolen labor in the US alone. The chairman founded the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement in 1991 as a revolutionary mass organization to defend the democratic rights of the African working class. The party also launched Black Star Industries, bringing all the economic development institutions of the party under one umbrella, creating partnerships with community members. Today, Chairman Omali as the leader of the African Socialist International, speaks to his growing base around the world and leads worldwide movements for the liberation of Africa and African people everywhere. Welcome, Chairman, and I am thrilled. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's really good to be with you and have an opportunity to speak to you and to your audience. Thank you.
Sure. I wanted to read your bio, and normally I don't read everyone's whole bio, but your bio is quite prolific. You've done a lot of work, and the Uhuru movement has lately been in the news, and it wasn't well known. And there's a lot of misinformation, which is why I wanted to kind of read read to the audience who you are. Could you describe, because what brings us here tonight is most recently there was an FBI raid, which I'm sure was very traumatic, in St. Petersburg, Florida. And it's not getting as much media attention as another FBI raid on the former President Trump, but also in Florida that just took place. But could you describe that event and also describe the Uhuru movement and why that's even on the FBI radar, if you will?
Thank you so much. I want to mention that St. Petersburg, Florida was one place where the raid occurred, but the raid also occurred in St. Louis, Missouri, where I am located right now, and where we are involved in an extraordinary economic development project to uplift the African community here that's treated so badly. So St. Louis, my home, was attacked 5 o'clock in the morning. My wife and I, who were sitting around the table planning out how we were going to be moving for the day. She oversees all of our economic work and was to be that morning working with 20 African young women who have been who've been trained as doulas right here in St. Louis, which every year sees enough Black babies die in the first year of life to fill 15 kindergarten classes. That's every year. So this doula program is what we were talking about. And suddenly, out of the night, this loud, booming sound comes from a loudspeaker, an electronic loudspeaker that commands everybody in the house should come out with our hands up. And this is the FBI, come up with your hands up with nothing in your hands. And then loud flashbang grenades began to explode all around the house as this person was commanding us to come out. So it's like these explosions are going on. We are being commanded to come out. So I walked out first and asked my wife to get on the phone to let people know that we were being raided. But she was not successful because our phones had been jammed. So we couldn't communicate with anybody. And when I got to the bottom of the stairs, I'm almost blinded because there's lights in my face, but in front of the doorway is this massive armored vehicle, and all around were these FBI agents with flak jackets and camouflage uniforms and automatic weapons. And when I walked out the door, these laser target beams were hitting me in the chest, coming off the top of these automatic weapons. So I expected they were going to kill me, like they had done Fred Hampton, in 1969. So they asked me to come out. My wife, she followed me out. And on her way out, she was almost struck in the face by a drone that they had sent into the house once I had opened the door and she was on her way out. So this drone passed her going up the stairwell. The explosions are still going off. This is 5 o'clock in the morning. Explosions are still going off around the house. And I was to later learn that they also had detonated these devices inside the rear of my house, in the rear stairwell, where they had knocked a window in and broken through the door and what have you. So once we got out, I was greeted first by these people who said they were FBI, and I was zip tied behind my back. My wife, when she came out, they handcuffed her behind her back. They took my cell phone. They said that they had a search warrant for my house, and I asked to see it. And they conveniently didn't have it right there with them on the spot, but someplace around in the vicinity, somebody had it. So I didn't see a search warrant, and they asked me to sit on the curb, me and my wife to sit on the curb, which was not something that was going to happen. And so they said, well, sit in the back seat of this car. You can sit here. And I'm saying, I don't want to sit anywhere. I want to leave here. I don't know why you're here. I don't know what this is all about. So they said, well, today, later this morning, there's going to be an indictment of a Russian national in Russia. And should he come to the United States, he would be jailed or something to that effect. And your name is somehow associated with the Russian national. And so I couldn't see a search warrant. I couldn't see the indictment because they said it hadn't been released yet. And it was only, and they had taken my phone. They entered my house. They stayed there for hours. So I harassed them finally about leaving. And so they said, okay, you can leave. With some difficulty, they cut the zip tie off me. They unhandcuffed my wife, and we were able to retrieve our car keys and to drive away. But at the same time this was happening, there's a solidarity center we have on the south side of St. Louis, which is predominantly white. And this is something that is occupied by the solidarity movement or the solidarity component of our party. which is primarily white people who do reparations work essentially, not only in St. Louis, but in about 130 some odd cities in the United States and 30 states in the United States. So they were, the FBI at the same time had used battering rams and knocked the doors in at Solidarity Center. Okay. There were two members of the Solidarity Movement who lived in an apartment upstairs, and the police went there, held them at handcuffs at gunpoint and what have you. And while they went through searching, they stayed there for 9 hours. Then they went, at the same time, there are two other members of the Solidarity Movement who lived in South St. Louis. They went to their home. They knocked the doors in and what have you. They took all the electronic devices that they found there. Same time in St. Petersburg, Florida, which would have been 6 a.m. They used battering rams and they knocked in the doors. I mean, these are scores of agents. This is not a couple of guys, with a search warrant. These are scores of agents and in camouflage. And in St. Petersburg, and in St. Louis also, the local police was involved. Same thing was true in St. Petersburg. So they used battering rams, knocked down the doors. We have a radio station there. They took us off the air for a while. And they occupied that building for hours. They stole their financial records. They stole recording devices, communications devices, and what have you. Just bunches of stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And they went to the residence of the young woman who presides over our communication information work, including the radio station, the Burning Spear newspaper that you referenced earlier on in this discussion. The police knocked on her door and told her someone was breaking into her car. So she went out to the car and to see about what was happening and to open the car to check it out. And then the FBI came from around some van that was there, and they searched and took her cell phone as well. So this was a multifaceted raid that they made on us. And I can't speak about the details of this just because I expect an indictment, and they took all of our materials, financial receipts, records. We have something like 50 some odd economic development projects going on in the most impoverished sectors of the African community at any given time. And so they have records related to all of that stuff, and in some ways it, offers a potential for jeopardizing, that economic work, which is where they've always hit the African movement historically. The economic work that we do has been like a primary target. We can talk about that moving forward. But so this was how they hit us on July 29th, early in the morning, pre-dawn raid. Typical. And I just want to say this. You mentioned something about my biography, and I've been doing this work for 50 years, more than 50 years, 60 years. The African People's Socialist Party, experienced its 50-year anniversary in May of this year. But I was an organizer for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, the organization of extraordinary young people who raised the Black Power slogan in 1966. I was an organizer there, and I was a SNCC organizer and leader in Florida when I was arrested for tearing that mural off the wall. So there's this history, and which makes insane. There's some kind of suggestion, as has been made by the kind of charges that's alleged against us, that we are in the employ of Russia. Because we raised up the issue of what did they say, of genocide against African people. But this is the historic demand that's come from our movement. 1950s, Paul Robeson was part of a demand for that. And he, by the way, was snatched up by the House Un-American Activities Committee brought into congressional hearings, are you a communist or were you ever a communist and this kind of thing. I mean, the FBI, the whole array of forces brought against him. This whole genocide in 1982, our party organized the first tribunal on reparations for African people in the world that's ever happened in history. To make the reparations question, like as we said at the time, we wanted to make it a household word. And we held that tribunal based on international law. And one component of that law was the actual United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide that the United States had not even ratified at that time. That was in 1982, 40 years ago that we did that. And so this thing about somehow the Russians got us to do this, and that we engaged in political work, electoral work. And so since we were doing electoral work, then the Russians paid for that too. And the Russians are responsible somehow for the electoral work that we do. And they're using us, these groups like us, and specifically us, in order to raise issues and questions that would embarrass the United States in the service of Russia or something to that effect. I mean, the charges, are just extraordinary. And so extraordinary, it's like the big lie. You tell the big lie. And it's a political assault that was made on us. And they've used the power of the law to carry it out. And that's quite part of the history. And either that or jailings and assassination. And so we anticipated all of that, especially on the 29th of July. So that's what we expected, all of that, and as things were happening. And it's still not finished. And that's something that really must be understood by everybody. There's a severe crisis that's happening in this country and much of the world.
Yes.
And in desperation that these forces are fleeing about and very dangerously, threatening the world and threatening us as well. So that's kind of sort of, like this. That's kind of sort of much as we can talk about in terms of specifics that happened on July 29th. Because the fact is that everything I say, even in this discussion now, which is being recorded and will be put into some kind of narrative that will support the ridiculous charges, and they are ridiculous charges, and they're not made because of an assumption of a legal basis for them. It's a political charge, and that they can use the law to justify carrying out this mission and have some assumptions of a success based on the fact that the laws themselves are so broad that anything that one does can fit into it, and they can take text, they can take emails, they can take things that we've done in terms of webinars, et cetera, and even this discussion, and then use it to paint the picture that fits the crime that they have created.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's been done before, and it continues to be the playbook, right?
Yes.
To vilify.
Yeah.
One of the things that was out there's a lot of misinformation about your group, and I'm glad you were able to clear up some of that. You were you're the founder of it, and you're doing a lot of grassroots. And I think people don't realize what you mean by helping the community. It's things like the farmers market. It's things like giving food to people who don't qualify for food stamps by growing your own food. It's supporting Black-owned businesses. Is this correct? Right.
And I think that's really important because we're not trying to create another charity entity, a charity, institutionalized charity. What we are trying to do is bring actual development to the community. And development can't come under circumstances exactly as they are, that is, using the mechanisms generally afforded to the community. So development comes in competition with the system itself. The system itself, for example, in St. Louis, you have the first land bank that ever happened in the United States was in St. Louis. They call it Land Reutilization Authority, the entity that controls this land bank. What this land bank does is use taxes to take the properties from Black people, and have been doing this for generations. And so what you have is that the Land Bank Authority, LRA, is the biggest landowner in St. Louis. And most of this happens in North St. Louis, where the majority of the African population lives. Your listeners should Google, your viewers should Google something called the St. Louis Team 4 Plan, TEAM 4. And this was something that was initiated in the 1970s, early 70s, with a clearly defined intent to sacrifice the well-being of the Black community, build up sections in the white community, and keep some sections stable. And this Team 4 plan is what helped generate this land reutilization authority that I just told you about. It takes tremendous amounts of properties from the Black community. So you will come to St. Louis, the north side in particular. It looks like it's been bombed out. So we've taken this on. We say that this is not a food desert, it's a power desert. The community doesn't have any power over its own affairs, its own existence. So what we do is we create this One Africa, One Nation farmers market that will allow for the people in the community to bring their wares and things like that and sell them in the community. They bring food and sell it in the community. And to purchase from each other so that money can begin to circulate a little bit in the community as opposed to simply coming in one door and then just going out the other door, which leaves us constantly, permanently destitute. So the thing is that to the extent that we can grow that kind of process, then we begin to grow some kind of development. Somebody can take this, the market place and the entity that they own there, that they pay a pittance in order to set up a booth. This can function as an incubator for the development of that business. So that business that's selling hula hoops that they make, or that business that's selling pickles that they've jarred and et cetera, starting off right there, selling inside the community, they learn how to do it. And then they can go and set up their own brick and mortar at some juncture should they decide to do it. And they can raise enough money doing that because they don't have to pay much to do the booths that we have here. So that's like one of the things that we're doing. And I mentioned to you the doula program. We just trained something like 20 young African women to be doulas. I told you the conditions with African babies there. There's no money in there for us. The fact is that these women now can affect the safe births for African women and children here in St. Louis. That we saw the children on another sector, impoverished sector of the community, as always happened in our community. They're playing basketball, makeshift basketball in the streets. So we raised the money ourselves. The city didn't do it, the government. We raised, and reparations payment coming from some white people. We raised more than $100,000 to put a basketball court down. It's a first-rate basketball court. It's going to have bleachers. It's already done in terms of the backboards and stuff like that, but fencing around, a beautiful basketball court. I mean, so we do actual development, and the community is able to have another view of itself different from that which is imposed on it from outside forces who control the economy and the politics of our community. That's kind of sort of the stuff that we've done here, and we've done it in other places, like in St. Petersburg, Florida. No Black radio station there, we put it there, for the community and what have you. And it's a nonprofit radio station, so it's not making money, like that. So it's for the community, and people can anticipate learning how to do radio because it's their young people. They can learn how to do radio and other things, and also
how to produce shows. That's amazing.
So
it sounds to me like you're giving your community, well, it's providing dignity, right? Like, it is. And that's what workers we are all being robbed of our dignity.
It is.
And that's allowing, because there's this movement now of criminalizing hopelessness.
That's the photo up there. That's the young woman, Akila Nai, who who was robbed of her phone. She's in St. Petersburg, Florida, who's over the newspaper. And,
let's run that. Arif, do you want to run that video really quick? It's a short clip, I think.
Intervention in the elections. They say it's an undemocratic process. What does the U.S. know about genuine democracy when it takes the ability for African people to feed, clothe, and house ourselves on a daily basis? You want to talk about destabilization? Talk to Nicaragua, talk to Venezuela, talk to Cuba, talk to Russia, and ask about undemocratic processes. That's what we're engaged in right now. And they are attempting to attack this organization. They are attempting to isolate the Black Power movement. That's what they are attempting to do. And we can have relationships with whoever we want. Whoever we see fit possible to make this revolution possible, we will have a relationship with them.
If you are working with the Russian government, were you not concerned at all that
the U.S. is working with every colonial government in the world, and nobody is saying a damn thing about what the U.S. is doing in Africa. What they don't raid the homes and ask white people any questions after they come back from Israel, where they're murdering Palestinian people every single day. They don't flash bomb their homes. They don't send the police there, even though they went into international waters in a place where they are killing Palestinians on a daily basis. Nobody is asking them any questions about their affiliation. The U.S. is affiliated with all the undemocratic forces around the world attempting to oppress African and other colonized people.
Why not? Yes or no? Did you accept Russian money as part of your...
You are trying to make this discussion about something that it is not. You want to know what this real problem is about? If you are genuinely interested to know what this situation is about, not live in fancy land about whether or not I accepted money from Russians, this is real. Not the way you want to see it, not the way you want to control the narrative. What I'm talking about right now is that they're using Russia as a part of a propaganda tool against the people to turn you away, to win, first of all, win your unity with the U.S. government. The U.S. government has no ability to answer any of your questions. None. It can't solve any of your problems, and they tell you that it's Russia's fault. Russia is not in your community causing you to starve. Russia is not in your community pushing you out. Russia is not the St. Pete Police Department that killed Tyronn Lewis in 1996. It was not Russia. It was the U.S. government that did that.
Thank you. Yeah. Powerful.
That's Akile Anai. And like I said, she's over all of our information and production and distribution in St. Petersburg at our headquarters there in Florida.
And I'm glad she didn't allow them to steer away the narrative,
right.
and keep it around what happened,
right,
and the injustice.
Right.
So
let me say, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Yeah, I just think it's really important. You asked some things about us, the African People's Socialist Party, and the Uhuru Movement. Mm-hmm. Where we're bigger than just our presence in St. Louis and in St. Petersburg, Florida, and in Missouri and Florida, and bigger in the United States. We are in the Caribbean. And we are in Africa in a very serious way, doing political work there. We are all over Europe, in the African communities in Europe and what have you. And I think that it's important to say that we come from a particular tendency of the African liberation movement going all the way back to Marcus Garvey. And that recognizes that African people be one people globally. And that we have been forcibly dispersed around the world through the whole process of colonial slavery that built the entire economic system that exploits and oppresses everybody around the world. It is what Karl Marx referred to as the primitive accumulation of capital that was the starting point, that he said constituted turning Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of black skins. And he said how what he characterized as wage slavery in Europe, requiring as a pedestal slavery pure and simple in what he called the New World. And this is the origin of this whole capitalist system. He referred to this primitive accumulation of capital. We're saying that what he was looking at is a new mode of production that came into existence, that has locked the entire world into this relationship of parasitic social systems sucking the resources and blood as a natural form of its existence. And I mentioned all these places where we're located because the United States government has clearly identified three strategic kinds of enemies. Russia obviously is one of them. China is one, and that is coming more and more to the surface for people who may not have been aware of it for a long period of time in Africa. Africa is one, and Africa is seen as this entity that should forever provide resources. It's seen as this inert kind of entity that predators can prey on and suck the blood and resources out forever. And what has happened is, and I say Africa is central to this as well, when you look at Kendrick Meeks, I think his name is Kendrick, but this Meeks guy, he's out of New York, he's a congressperson. And the Congress, the House of Representatives, has passed some kind of law that has yet to be adopted by the Senate, but I won't be surprised if it should, because it calls for punishing all of Africa that refuses to unite with the US goals in Russia, and that all of what they refer to as the diaspora, the Black diaspora, which would include me and people like me, and not just, but in other countries as well. This is the so-called African diaspora is targeted by Meeks's thing. This is now the House of Representatives passed this. And then at the same time, what you see happening is United States Marines, for the first time in its 246-year history, has given a 4th star to a Black man, to an African. And they have tasked him with overseeing the Africa Command, which has the responsibility of controlling Africa, not only to prevent African people ourselves from rising up, but also in the contest that the United States is engaged in with Russia, and particularly China in Africa. China is the fastest growing economic force in Africa today. I'm not saying this with some kind of braggadocio, but I'm saying now we're looking at contests that's happening here that involves Black people in Africa. And then the New York based, the FBI, the same one that we're talking about, 1969. And before that had to put forth what it called its counterintelligence program to deal with Black nationalist hate groups. 1969, it declared the Black Panther Party the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States. They killed a lot of Panthers. And so this was in the 1960s. So they've always centered, especially African people who are dealing internationally with other forces around the world. They always have targeted us. Killed Malcolm almost as soon as he got back from Africa in the Middle East. They killed King as soon as he started talking about Vietnam and raising those kinds of questions, et cetera. And of course, Garvey, who led the largest anti-imperialist movement in history. So the FBI framed him for what they call using the mail to defraud people, because Black people, first time and only time in our history, through the Garvey movement, Black people own steamship lines. And this again is a part of the whole thing about any kind of economic development that uplifts Africa, uplifts African people, because they would allow us to remain, they would demand that we remain free. Just the resources to be sucked out of Africa, and there's not a modern device that anybody uses in any society today that doesn't come from Africa, depend on African resources from Africa. So to keep Africa divided, to keep Africa oppressed, and to prevent something from happening like what Marcus Garvey had envisioned when he was trying to do. And that's part of what puts us in the crosshairs, this whole question, this whole war that's being made against Africa and to maintain the status quo. And this arrangement, this global arrangement that's predatory, parasitic. And then you look at the guy who is the Secretary of Defense for the first time in history, a Black man, a former General Lloyd Austin. So Africa, Russia, and the outgoing head of AFRICOM has identified the problems that they have to deal with is what they call violent extremism in Africa, and this issue of the intervention of Russia and China. So you see, and then Meeks was, by the way, the guy who put this bill in the House. He was with Pelosi when she went to Taiwan. So you see the convergence of all of these questions and how that's connected to what happened in North St. Louis and South St. Petersburg, Florida. It's all a part of the same contradiction that a very troubled system is trying to resolve.
Right. Yes, there is a breakdown or desperation. I say an era of desperation right now, for sure, of trying to stop and silence movements that are bringing truth.
Yeah.
And you've seen it in the censorship. I'm sure you've seen the censorship in independent media that's happening, the demonetization, the deplatforming. And then, I mean, my story is small compared to everyone else's, but when I came forward, I was immediately called. The first thing they said was that I was a Russian asset. I grew up, I was born in California and grew up on a farm in Wisconsin. My great grandmother was in the suffragette movement. You know what I mean? Like I'm not Russian, and I don't know where that came from, but that's the go-to for anything to try to try to villainize, to try to marginalize, to try to silence, to try to suppress, and to try to give an excuse to use things like the Espionage Act, like what they're doing to Julian Assange, who's Australian, who's not even American.
Yeah.
And who embarrassed the empire because he exposed the war crimes and he did his job as a journalist, actually. Yeah. And for that, we're watching a slow motion execution, play out. And so it's the system is truly broken. And what moved me about the Uhuru movement and what you're doing is those things of trying to uplift and build. You're not tearing down, you're building up, because people can use the rhetoric of revolution, but if there's nothing to go to, then nothing to build, then you're just going back into another oppressive system. No
revolution, no movement that can't predict the future for the oppressed is a revolutionary movement. And just to be able to make a complaint, that's not enough to make you revolutionary. And as quiet as it's kept, and we got people who make brilliant complaints. I see them all the time. They make magnificent, brilliant complaints. But what was Marx says, that philosophers have only interpret the world. The task is to change it. And so that's the thing that has to happen. And in any genuine revolutionary movement, when you talk about negating this system, it's not just a matter of saying no. Its negation really means no because of this development that we are bringing forth. It's not just saying no. It's saying no to the past and yes to a future that's definable. Yes.
Very good. Very good. Reef, I wanted to check in with you to see, I know that people are commenting and have questions. So is there anything that you'd like to ask the chairman? That's
yes, ma'am. INN member.
We have a lot. Whoa,
INN member Colin has. How would you define organization, and what does organization look like in your opinion?
How do you define organization? Well, I don't know if all organizations look the same. We have a particular form of organization that, frankly, was influenced by a man named Vladimir Lenin, who happened to be Russian, which this government would be opposed to, the existing Russian government. And it's based on certain organizational principles. And it presupposes that the people have come together around some basic principles, and that they have established principles and methodology through which they would carry out the aims that they've established collectively for themselves. And I don't have some kind of academic explanation of organization. I don't have academic. I can't. Yeah.
That's anything else you got there, Reef?
Not yet. I'll wait for some more to come in.
Okay, you've got a lot of comments, though.
I will say that it is the only weapon that the people have. It is the means by which people can come together collectively and have unity of will and of action. It's that, and without organization, we have nothing. Otherwise, we try to take this thing on just as individuals, and we are outnumbered considerably. And they come in the night with various kinds of forces and a great capacity of organization. The weakness of the working class, of the exploited and oppressed and colonized people of the world, a critical aspect of that is organization, the lack of organization. So, it's a fundamental question. It's a fundamental issue.
One more question. What advice do you have for someone new to Black August? Ask Yipper 99. If you have anything to add on that.
Well, Black August is something that's become really important in part because of the experience of African people who are being imprisoned. And the Black August movement revolves around just the historical significance of August. And Marcus Garvey was born in August. George Jackson and Jonathan Jackson were killed in August. And these were George Jackson, of course, revolutionary, became a revolutionary while in prison. His brother was killed in not Alameda, but was killed there in California, trying to free him. And so Black August, has been something that's held up very, very seriously, and it's used as a means to organize African people, especially paying attention to the question of political prisoners, something that's ignored in this country. This country pretends there not to be anything like political prisoners. They talk about gulags, and when they talk about Russia, but the fact is that 1 out of every 8 human beings on earth who's in prison is an African in this country. And so there are more African people in prison in the United States than there are people in some countries in Africa. So there's a lot of attention through Black August is given to that. And the thing I would say is to activists dealing with the issue of Black August is that you have to dig in around that question, especially around political prisoners and prisoners of war. But you have to also be able to connect that struggle to the larger struggle. That the fact is there must be a to-what end, because as long as this social system continues to exist on the planet Earth, as long as colonialism continues to exist, then there are going to be political prisoners, prisoners of war, FBI raids, pre-dawn raids, and things like that. So it's absolutely necessary to fight against the pre-dawn raids and free the political prisoners and prisoners of war, at least to establish movements and struggles to do that, because for one thing, in people engaging in struggle, it enhances their capacity to struggle. That's how people learn through engaging in struggle. And that's how they also learn the limitations of the system that oppresses us. So do that, but also you have to come to a conclusion of a to what end. What is it that we're fighting for ultimately? You've got to be able to be a part of a process that is engaged in destroying the past of colonialism and capitalism and oppression, and building a future of free human beings, free of bosses and workers and slaves and masters. That's the kind of world that we have to be in the process of constructing, and having some kind of science that informs what it is that how we carry that out.
Do you going through what you've gone through just a few weeks ago, which, I admire the way that you've devoted your life to this activism, but you're at a point in your life where, I guess rest is far away, but, but how you've seen a lot. Like, is it getting worse, or is it our imagination that it's getting worse? Because it feels collectively like this country's getting worse, more fascist, more authoritative, or is that just that?
No, the country is getting worse in terms of government, the social system. There's no doubt about that.
Okay.
But is it getting worse for the people? I say no. And I think the critical question here goes back to the question of organization. It also goes back to the question of some kind of political clarity. Like genuinely, for revolutions to occur, there's certain necessary ingredients that include crisis, like what we're experiencing now. The system is in crisis, and it should be in crisis. A system based on colonialism and terror and stealing the resources of the people of the world, starving people. You live in the United States and you see people standing in front of stores with cardboard signs asking to be fed, and living under bridges and tents, whole communities of tents. That's extraordinary. So crisis abounds in this country. It becomes impossible for the ruling class to rule in the same old way. That's a prerequisite, and that's what you see all over. I mean, we mentioned Joe Biden But Biden, you look at things like George Floyd, you look at Mike Brown, you're looking at Biden's crimes against the people in terms of that, piece of legislation that he with the police department developed and Clinton carried out to put 100,000 policemen in the streets of this country, and everybody knew that he was talking about putting them in the Black communities, et cetera. So you have crisis. You have a situation where the United States government has created this program they call 1033, where so-called surplus weapons from the Pentagon are given to police departments throughout this country. How do you have a surplus every year? That's not a surplus. What you've got is that the Pentagon has a budget that includes funding these organizations. This is to stabilize and make sure that Black people, when we rise up, that they have this capacity to contain us. That's why we say the police function as a domestic military force, a colonial force to keep African people oppressed. So the crisis, they can't rule in the same old way. And another thing that's absolutely necessary is that the people have to have concluded that anything is better than this, that we're not going to live like this. We see that happening on some different kinds of levels, some of them even from what we characterize the right wing. I mean, it wasn't Black people who tried to overthrow the government. It wasn't Black people chasing Biden through the halls of the Capitol, talking about hanging him and stuff like that, Penton, I meant, not Pence. It wasn't Black people who did that. And who tried to keep Biden from, going into office. Nor was it you. And no matter what they might say, you have these mobs of terrorists, and nothing is. But there's a crisis in the whole system. It can't rule in the same way. More and more people are concluding that anything is better than hell. And there's, I saw a poll a couple of weeks ago said that 54% of so-called U.S. voters think that the system has to be overturned. 54%.
Yeah,
that's a huge crisis that they are confronted with. And then there must be organization. There must be revolutionary organization guided by advanced revolutionary theory. And I think you put all of this stuff together, and you create the new world that we're talking about. And this distinguishes us from some of the people who sort of thinks that the system would sort of peter out, and that you can have a Bernie Sanders solution where you get $15 an hour over a number of years and something like that. The social system, the whole capitalist social system cannot coexist with the socialist social system. I don't care what you say. I mean, you never heard of a mode of production coexisting with another previous mode of production. So that means that human beings have a responsibility. We have a responsibility, not just to sit around and hope this thing will wither away on its own. It didn't get here on its own. It's not maintained on its own. Human beings are doing this, and they place this stuff here to suppress, to repress, to oppress, starve, exploit, and we have to do something about that. That's where the question of organization is fundamentally important, and also political and ideological clarity about what it is that we're trying to go. And so what we do in our communities, the work that we do, partially is our work, it revolves around the total and absolute liberation of the entire continent of Africa, that where these false borders have been created by white people, by colonizers in 1884 and 86 that carved up Africa to give it out to each other like some mafia meeting that they had, and where our resources continue to be exploited on a daily basis, where you have a situation where the majority of people trying to survive off $2 a day live in Africa. That's extraordinary when you consider the fact that modern economies could not suffice, couldn't exist. I mean, Steve Jobs is who he is because of the coltan that came from Africa that caused millions and millions and millions of lives, even today. So, it's a tremendous resource, but it's not even accessible to African people. And that's the thing, that's the status quo that has to be challenged. It has to be changed. It has to be transformed. And that's the work that we are committed to doing. Africa must be free, and African people must be free. And so even in the process of doing that, we're escaping from the definitions that have been imposed on us by those who have enslaved us. And for the longest period of time, It's the oppressor. It's the colonizer who's been the subjects of history, and the rest of us have been objects of history. And so the colonizer is not accustomed to hearing himself defined by those who are colonized, those who are the objects. Now the objects are increasingly moving into history and are beginning to find reality for ourselves and beginning to define the colonizer too. And that's an unpleasant sound for the colonizer. And so because they don't like what's being said, they will wake you up pre-dawn in the morning with flashbang grenades. They will knock your doors down. They will assassinate you and do all kinds of horrible things, which keeps a lot of people from seeing it, as you know.
Very well said. And and going back to that, and it was kind of embedded in my thought when I was asking you the other question. How do you not get weary? Because it feels like we make steps forward for the working class. We make things happen that are good, and then they get torn apart by the ruling class. What is your inspiration, and how do you keep going?
Because I understand the system. I see it's the system that's in trouble. Why the hell would they be? Listen, you should see the community I live in. They're in West, they're in Redbud Avenue. Why in the hell would the United States government be spending all these resources with flashbang grenades? It's they who are in a state of desperation and weakness. The working class and the colonized people suffer from a lack of organization and somehow ideological and theoretical clarity, which is one of the reasons the African People's Socialist Party was attacked. But it is they who are suffering, and they have competition now that you never had, not only from the oppressed, but from China, from Russia, all these other forces, from Venezuela that can refuse to get on their knees, from Nicaragua, from the Taliban who beat them, yet they're starving today by keeping Taliban's the people's own money, keeping the Afghans' own money that's stuck in their system and what have you. So it's a whole new day. It is they who, look at Biden slithering over to Saudi Arabia to fist bump somebody he said that he was going to treat like a pariah forever.
Right.
Of course you are. That's not strength. And bombing my house is not strength. And to say that a system is so fragile that they're concerned about what Black people are saying in the heart of the most oppressed sectors of the community, that is not a sign of strength. That is severe stress and weakness that they're confronted with. That's the thing that keeps me up, you understand? Because we're going to see the demise of this system, no matter the outcome of July 29th, it's somebody once told me, I don't hunt, but somebody once told me that you can shoot a running deer in the heart and it can still run for another 50 yards before it collapses. This deer has been shot in the heart. And, so it's in motion now, but I can, the signs of the crisis are very obvious,
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
So, and going back to some of the building that you're doing, how can, my audience that's watching you now, that is moved by what you're saying, that wants to be part of it, how can they be part of it? And what do you have coming up? What are ways that they can support?
Well, the first thing I really, really invite everybody, all of your listeners, you don't have to listen to what I'm saying, come to St. Louis. Come, and if you're closer, go to St. Petersburg, Florida, or go to Oakland to some of our centers where you can see the actual work. And I think this is important because what the government would do is create this notion of this force that's out there that's, in the dark and in the shadows doing all these evil things. Come and see for yourself. We are transparent. You don't have to use a flashbang grenade to get to see what we are doing. Come and see. That's the first thing we invite you to do. And I want you to also be aware that there is a Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off UHURU website is handsoffuhuru.org. And there you can connect to see what it is that you might be able to do. And I'm going to be touring in the recent period too, so people can support that and go to Hands Off Uhuru. And also the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, InPDUM, is having its convention on September 22nd and through the 4th in St. Louis. Come to St. Louis to the convention that's going to be held by InPDUM. Nothing secret about it. And you might have to go through a winding search, because you might be somebody who wishes everybody harm, but you won't have to use a flashbang grenade. You won't have to have an armored vehicle out in front when you come. So
No
that's
tanks, no tanks needed.
no
right?
tanks needed. No tanks needed. And so you can
Right.
go to InPDUM, INPDUM,
Mhm.
INPDUM 2022 eventbrite.com to get up on that. I really think people should go to the Days of Reparations to African People.
Mhm.
And that's going to be happening in several cities, including Oakland, Philadelphia, and other cities. And you can get information on that by going to Uhuru Tours, UHURU tours.com. And then there's a Uhuru Book Fair that we're doing in Philadelphia. We have a marketplace there in Philadelphia, and that's going to be September 17th. And you can go to apspuhuru.org, apspuhuru.org, or visit Uhuru Tours for that as well. And finally, the 14th annual march that on the White House that's done by the Black Hispanic Coalition for Social Justice, Peace and Reparations will be occurring on November 5th and 6th. And all the things that I'm mentioning now will be highlighting this thing that happened on the 29th and trying to anticipate how the people can move, should move, because in many ways, what just happened to us is sort of a light in the canary in the mine. So, so please look at all of that stuff. And in terms of the Black and our websites are being disrupted. I should mention that too right now.
Oh, wow.
So this whole thing about, especially around the annual Black People's March on the White House, November 5th and 6th, 2022, Washington, D.C. And you can go to blackisbackcoalition.org and get information on that.
Yeah, and Reef has put a lot of that in the so audience members, if you missed any of that, you can look at it in the underneath what we're talking. We got the links, and then we're this stream is gone on Rockfin and Rumble, and YouTube doesn't always leave up my interviews, but so far it's still up. So but Rockfin and Rumble don't censor, and Odyssey doesn't censor, and also so you can find all the links there for anyone. And if you want to ask questions of the chairman,
well, I want to be talking more to you about these entities platforms that don't censor. And I just also want to say that it's a real delight to have met you. It really is.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's been a complete honor for me. I really love all the work that you've done. I want to support it and lift up your voice any way I can. And I know you lift up my voice as well. We have to lift up each other right now. And because they don't want to allow anyone to expose the empire and expose the colonialism and the imperialism.
Exactly.
And anyone who does speak about it, we get punished in one way or another. So as far as you mentioned the events, and those are wonderful, and the things that you're doing. And by the way, my daughter actually has a doula certification. It's a very for people that are interested, doulas are kind of misunderstood sometimes. But they go in hand in hand with midwifery, and it's a really great, actually needed service. And they not only help with birthing, but they also help post. They help with breastfeeding, and sometimes there's difficulty latching on and whatnot. And it's things that aren't in communities right now. And sometimes hospitals are funny about allowing doulas or midwifery students in, or experts in, but now they're getting better. I mean, it depends. It's just how it is.
I mean, you look at St. Louis, where they closed the only Black hospital in the city, and I told you about the consequences in terms of the death rate of Black babies. So this is a really urgent task, and I appreciate it. I'm glad to hear that your daughter is doing that. And you're right, it's more than just the birthing process, but there's a lot that's associated with it that these these women do and can do.
Yeah, it creates community and answers questions that, and especially if you don't have insurance or your insurance lacking, it's you don't get services, and they're crucial.
Right.
When you have a new life coming into the world. So I really admire all of that. So Reef, did you want to bring in any more comments or questions? Because I know we're getting close to the end here. You're muted, just so you know. Okay, good. All right. Well, I wanted to leave kind of the last words with you, Chairman. What would you like to leave our audience with, and kind of as we move forward here?
I want to, first of all, express my appreciation to you and to your audience for coming on to this discussion.
Thank you.
I don't think that this is something that gets won in the courtroom. I think it gets won with public opinion and with people like yourselves who have the courage to step forward and to struggle against the narrative that's been constructed for us. I would like for your listeners to express solidarity and support to the party, to our movement in opposition to what the government has done. I would like for your listeners, in the process of doing that, those who are capable of stating that you support our right to advocate and organize for the liberation and unification of Africa and African people. You don't have to have that as your political line, but to support our right to be able to do that, I think is really important, because it's bigger than us. And we've seen too many generations go through this who advocate and organize around the same thing we're doing. And so whatever the outcome of these indictments and threatened indictments, it has to contribute to building a movement and building solidarity with the right of African people to have a free Africa and to be a free people globally. And then I'm asking your viewers, again, go to the Hands Off Uhuru website and then come to St. Louis. And if St. Louis is too far, if you're in the West Coast, go to Oakland, where we have a meaningful base and organization doing concrete kind of stuff that we're talking about, or go to St. Petersburg, Florida, or go to Philadelphia, and to see concretely what it is. And also to prove to yourself that we're a transparent force, that you can see concretely what we do and how it affects the community. So those are things that I would call on your viewers to do, and also to accept my most profound appreciation for being with me and you for the several minutes that we've just done this.
Oh, thank you. It was a very meaningful conversation for me. And I wanted to leave on this note about Uhuru, the meaning in Swahili, if you want to give the definition to
Uhuru. Yes. Uhuru in Swahili, it means freedom. And it's really something when people are afraid of Uhuru. It was a slogan demand that was put forth by the Kenyan Land Freedom Army that was called Mau Mau, who fought the British for freedom, for freeing our Kenya in East Africa. And so it is a slogan demand that's familiar inside sections of the movement, while it might not be that common. And people often refer to us as the Uhurus, and most often not knowing what the hell it means. But it means freedom in Kiswahili, yes.
Well, there you have it. And on that note, Uhuru, and thank you so much. Much gratitude, Chairman. Hope I see you again soon. And to the audience who joined us, thank you so much. Look at the links, follow the movement, do what you can and participate, because we are going to create a new future and it's going to be better. This is.
And if you know any lawyers.
Oh,
we'll be talking more. Yeah.
Oh, you need, and if you're a lawyer,
yeah.
If you're an attorney,
yes.
Contact, the organization, because I think there's might be some things coming down the pike for all of us, actually, but for them specifically, for the movement. So So there you have it. Have a good night, and thank you for joining us. Please do check out those links that are in the chat. All right.
Right on. Yeah. Thank you, Tara. Thank you so much. Uhuru.